Hello my dear friends, you're in the military with summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first let's talk about the conflict on the territory Ukraine, where during the previous 12 hours the Russians have improved their position significantly. And first let's talk about the Zaporizhzhia direction, where once again we received lots of changes on the ground, and as you can see this time the map has been adjusted in the Russian favor, and these are the changes between the dates. This is the end of the 14th of August and this is the beginning of the 15th of August of 2026. As you can see, we have recolored back lots of villages and towns in this area back under complete Russian control. So let's take a look at the map and let's see how the map has been adjusted since the end of the 10th of August of 2026. So this is the situation by the end of the 10th of August of 2026, and this is exactly when everything started. The Russians controlled the territories through the Zaporizhzhia direction. The Ukrainians were counter-attacking, and at the end of the 11th of August of 2026, the sources reported that the Russians finished the battle for the settlement of Novomykolaivka. We discussed the situation. If you remember, during the 11th of August of 2026, we came to the conclusion that the Russians managed to encircle this pocket. So the Russians were preparing themselves before something bigger. But 2 days after, pro-Ukrainian sources published a video with basically dozens of flags raised through the entire Zaporizhzhia direction. Indeed, there were lots of flags raised through this territory, and based on this video, during the 13th of August of 2026, we adjusted the map and we colored all these territories under complete Ukrainian control. So these are the changes between 12th and the 30th of August of 2026. If you remember, the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, also made a statement on this matter. He confirmed that the Ukrainians finished this counter-offensive operation, and he said many other different things on this matter. And of course, during the 14th of August of 2026, we were waiting for the Russian side. We were waiting whether the Russians would provide their own proofs or something similar or something like this to confirm that this territory is still under complete Russian control. But during the 14th of August of 2026, nothing was published by pro-Russian sources, and yesterday basically we came to the conclusion that most likely indeed the Ukrainians, as a result of this counter-offensive operation that was announced by the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, managed to improve their position so significantly. But this morning, on the 15th of August of 2026, the Russians published a video. Most likely the Russians during the previous 2 days were collecting updates from different towns and cities, were communicating with soldiers on the ground with the purpose to ask them to prepare videos with flags, just to confirm that not everything that was colored in Ukraine's favor is under complete Ukraine control. And pro-Russian sources published this video. I will just hover this icon with flag, and as you can see, all these icons were highlighted through the entire Zaporizhzhia direction, and these are the villages, towns and territories where the Russians raised their flags according to this video. So this is the video. The video is a very long one. We have lots of episodes, once again dozens of episodes through the entire Zaporizhzhia direction where the Russians were raising their flags. So based on this video, this morning we also adjusted the map, and this time we adjusted the map in the Russian favor. This is a very important video because from one side this video confirms that the Russians have strong control over some territories in this area, but from the other side we see that there are lots of places where the Russians haven't raised their flags, which means that these territories most likely are under strong control of the armed forces of Ukraine. For example, during this video we didn't see an episode with the Russians in the area of Andriivka, which means that most likely this village was indeed recaptured by the armed forces of Ukraine. We haven't received even a single episode from the settlement of Myrne, which means that this village was also recaptured. For example, as for the settlement of Alexandergrad, This is a very important episode. Through this video, we have one episode where a Russian soldier was raising a flag right exactly at this point. But after analysis, after a very long analysis, we came to conclusion that this episode is an episode of 2025, when the Russians just took the settlement under complete control. So the Russians used an archived video to confirm control over the territory. So that is why we haven't adjusted the settlement. And later, we received another very important update. According to information we have today, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, Belousov, came to the Zaporizhzhia direction in the area of responsibilities of the Group of Forces East, and he started inspection. And we came to conclusion that most likely the video that was published by Ukrainian sources was published 2 days ago, just with the purpose to make problems to the Group of Forces East and to create the situation when the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will suffer some problems and issues with the Zaporizhzhia direction. So that was once again from the Ukrainian side something like a media victory, but today we see that lots of territories were recolored back under Russian control. Furthermore, this morning, the Group of Forces East published another report, and according to this report, the Russians established complete control over the settlement of Rybalse. And this video was published this morning by the Group of Forces East, and in this video we can see how exactly the clashes for the settlement of Rybalse were taking place. In this video we can see lots of episodes, and through the last parts of this video, through the last section of this video, we can see at least 2 flags that were raised by Russians. One of these flags was raised in the northern parts of the settlement, and the second one through the southern parts of the settlement. Based on this video, we colored the territory, and as you can see, we have colored not just the settlement of Rybalse, but we have colored the entire pocket, because we believe that there are no more positions of the armed forces Ukraine through these territories. We need to understand one important thing, that during the summer military campaign, or just through the entire military campaign of 2025, the Russians captured every single village in this pocket. But so if we rewind updates, let's say till the beginning of February of 2026, we might see all these villages under complete Russian control. So all these territories are under complete Russian control by the beginning of the 1st of February of 2026. But later the Ukrainians launched their counter-offensive operation that ended only in probably in the middle of July of 2026, and as a result of this counter-offensive operation, the armed forces of Ukraine managed to recapture lots of territories, and there were reports that the Ukrainians managed to recapture the villages of Bratskaya, Pishane, Gerasimivka, Ostapovskaya. But since the moment when the Ukrainians reported about control over the villages, we haven't received anything to confirm this. So that is why we've been keeping these territories as a gray zone for a very long period of time. As for the settlement of Andriivka, this village was colored under complete Ukraine's control probably 2 or 3 months ago, because we received videos of how Ukrainian soldiers were moving through these territories. But most likely those were infiltration groups, and now everything, as we can see, was stabilized. Now everything is clear, and now we see the entire picture. The Russians managed to take under complete control the settlement of Rybalse. Most likely the pocket to the east of the settlement of Rybalse was destroyed by Russians. Either there were no pocket at all, but we have what we have. So this is the situation in this area, and as you can see, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly, especially through the eastern Zaporizhzhia direction. And now from this configuration, the front line, it's become clear that most likely the Russians would continue offensive operation further in the western direction with the purpose to maintain the lines. Most likely the next target for the armed force of the Russian Federation are the villages of Zorivka, Boykovo and Pridorozhne. This will allow the Russians to maintain the line, to shorten the distances, and to prepare themselves before the beginning of another major offensive operation, and probably even towards the settlement of Novomykolaivka, or at least towards the road TO 408 between the villages of Novomykolaivka and the city of Orekhov. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation through the Dobropolye and Sloviansk direction. During the previous 12 hours we haven't received anything special. The most important thing probably is that the Russians, since the beginning of the major battle for the Sloviansk agglomeration, have already destroyed 3 out of 9 bridges along the river of Kazionny Torets. So there are bridges that connect the western and the eastern parts of the city, and the Russians, as you can see, have already destroyed 33% of these bridges, and the Russians continue this process, which means that the preparation of the final preparation of the battle for the Sloviansk agglomeration has begun. As for the northern directions, as for the Kharkiv direction, during the previous 12 hours we received additional changes around the settlement of Kudiivka. We expected that the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation would report control over the territory, but for some reason the Russians didn't do this. We have at least 3 episodes where Russians were raising the Russian flag through the settlement, and based on these videos we have adjusted at least part of the settlement and the complete Russian control, and the Russians continue offensive operation. And these are the changes on the ground between the dates. This is the end of the 14th of August, and this is already the beginning of the 15th of August of 2026. Today the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation haven't confirmed Russian control over the territory, but most likely this will happen in coming days. Meanwhile, the Russians continue bombing and attacking positions to the south of the settlement. In this video we can see a warehouse destroyed as a result of the Russian attack when the Russians were using aviation bombs. Now let's talk about massive attacks. During the previous 12 hours, both the Russians and the Ukrainians continued attacking each other. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine this morning reported that Russians used 152 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians managed to bring down 127 air vehicles. The sources reported that the Russians were mainly attacking the southern parts of Ukraine and the southwestern parts of Ukraine, especially around the city of Odessa, and lots of updates were published during the night. In this, through these pictures, we can see the consequences of attack in the Odessa region. In this video, we can see a fire broke out right after the Russians attacked objects of the port infrastructure. In this video, we can see vessels that were moving through the Dniester estuary, and here we can see how the Russians were hunting and destroying them. It seems that the Ukrainians were using these vehicles with the purpose to create some barriers through the Dniester estuary, but the Russians attacked them and destroyed. In the area of the settlement of Novomykolaivka, the Russians managed to discover a temporary deployment point of the armored forces of Ukraine. In this video we can see lots of soldiers that were entering the building, and then the Russians attacked this territory with drones and the building was wiped out. The Ukrainians also attacked deep inside of the territory of Russia, and this picture was published yesterday in the evening, and here we have lots of roads of attacks. As you can see, the Ukrainians were using hundreds of drones. Pro-Ukrainian sources yesterday in the evening reported that the Ukrainians launched up to 480 drones, and the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation this morning reported that during the night the Russians destroyed almost 600 drones, more precisely 598 drones were intercepted and destroyed over the sky of the Russian Federation. But despite these numbers and despite the fact that the Russians have destroyed almost anything, several drones managed to break through Russia's layered air defense and to strike important facilities. According to sources we have, the Ukrainians were attacking the settlement by the name of Vyksa. More precisely, the Ukrainians were attacking the Savasleyka airbase, so one of the most important air bases of the Russian Federation. The Russians used Savasleyka airbase for aircraft concentration before beginning of massive attacks through the entire territory of Ukraine. The second batch of drones moved in the eastern direction, and the Ukrainians attacked the settlement of Samara. As for the settlement of Samara, the Ukrainians, according to information we have, attacked an object of the military military infrastructure. We're talking about this military plant. So this enterprise was attacked. Flamingo FP-5 cruise missile strike on Progress launch complex. So this is a very important facility of Russia because according to information we have, this object the Russians used to produce Soyuz-2 Soyuz-2 missiles. And as you might know, Soyuz-2 missiles are carriers for the Russian satellite, and not just simple satellites. This is an enterprise. This is the rocket that was deploying the Russian analog of Starlink system, the satellite Internet Rassvet from Bureau 1440. And the sources reported that this facility was badly damaged, and we have a lot of videos on this matter. In these videos we can see the consequences of attack, black smoke over this facility, and according to information we have, this is the only enterprise that produces rockets Soyuz, and which means that if the Ukrainians indeed manage to deal significant damage to these facilities, the Russians would be forced to change their positions and their timings and their schedule on this internet system and many other different satellite systems that the Russians were planning to launch in coming days. So this is a very important facility, and if indeed the Ukrainians manage to deal damage to this facility, and the sources are saying that this is the only enterprise that produces Soyuz rockets, this can lead to unpredictable consequences to Russians. As for the settlement of Savasleyka, the strategical aviation base, we can say that if the Ukrainians attack the territory, this means that most likely the Ukrainians have an intelligence information that the Russians are planning to launch a massive attack through the entire territory of Ukraine, because every time before the beginning of another massive attack, the Ukrainians try to attack either the Engels airbase in the area of the settlement of Saratov, this one, or Savasleyka. So they always try to hit airfields before the beginning of another massive attack, so which means that we have some proofs that something big might happen already between the 15th and the 16th of August of 2026, and due to strike on the settlement of Samara, the retaliation from the Russian side could be much difficult for the Ukrainian side. Another important thing about the Black Sea, these days we start receiving videos and updates that the Russians began constructing protection nets over their vessels in the area of the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov, which means that most likely the Russians will accelerate this process with the purpose to create something like additional protection to every single vessel in this area, with the purpose to save them and to protect them against Ukraine's drones. So this is a very interesting situation, and this is exactly how the Russians decided to resolve the issue of the Black Sea. I would like to remind you that the President of Ukraine, Zelensky, several days ago proposed to halt strikes, but the Russians rejected that idea, and the Russians preferred to protect their vessels with additional protection instead of cessation of fire through this area. Another important update was published by pro-Ukrainian intelligence service. According to pro-Ukrainian sources, the Russians have concentrated 50,000 soldiers of the armed forces of North Korea. Now already 50,000 soldiers of the armed forces of North Korea, compared to their previously reported 30,000, will be deployed to the Bryansk, Kursk and Belgorod regions in order to free up the armed forces of the Russian Federation, according to the main Directorate of Intelligence of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. So 50,000, this is not a very big number, but 50,000 is enough for a local bridge or for local breakthrough. These 50,000, according to the Ukraine intelligence service, would be concentrated between Bryansk, Kursk and Belgorod regions. Maybe these 50,000 troops would be used by the Russians, let's say, to begin the Suma offensive operation, or for a decisive breakthrough in the Kharkiv area, or even for opening another front line through the Chernigov region. Everything is possible, but one thing is clear: the Ukrainians right now need to think how to deploy additional troops right in front of the North Korean soldiers, with the purpose to stabilize the situation and not to get another breakthrough through the northern regions of Ukraine. And that's it for the short video. The Military with Samara channel reminds that we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching, subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye.